So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Invincible, so let's start the series. The aircraft crashed. There would be no survivors, nothing could survive an impact like that, and Maeve could still hear their screams, wails carried away on the wind, and see their faces, that mother and her little girl, pleading with her not to leave, to save them. Maeve witnessed it all from Homelander's arms, forcing herself to watch as the once proud airliner crashed to the ground nose first. Her dreams would be plagued by their screams for months. Meanwhile, Homelander had simply stood there and extended his hand to her. Don't die with them. Their fate had been sealed the moment that swaggering idiot ruined the controls with his heat vision. For words how they burned in her mind, don't die with them. Maybe it would have been better if she was still on that plane. Maybe then this guilt would let her be. She was a coward. She felt sick and tainted in a way she hadn't been before. She wanted to scream and shout and rant and rage, but it wouldn't do her any good. A dark dot shot out of the aircraft. Look at the balls on that one, Homelander laughed. Maeve frowned at him just as much as she did at him. Was there a real jump? There was no sense in that. They must have realized that they would not be able to survive the fall without a parachute, there was simply no way. What the devil was it? As she watched in horror, golden light erupted in the air above the plane, forming a towering beast. No, it was a fox, and it was easily 3 times as large as the plane as it flew by, enveloping the struggling ship in 9 tails of pure light, each curling around the craft in a protective cocoon. The beast held the plane close to its chest, oblivious to gravity or its impending death. But it didn't end there. Violent violet light flared as someone else threw themselves out the back of the plane, and then there was another titan in the sky, just as big as the last one. It was a great winged warrior, held aloft by strange wings, and unlike its companion, it didn't try to take control of the craft. Instead, it hurtled toward the ground, landed, and took up a bracing stance in an open field below. Spreading its wings equally wide across its arms and legs, it stood firm even as the beast hurtled its way. When the fox collided with it head-on a moment later, his intentions were evident. Whoa! Even though the giants were big and easy to see from this distance, Maeve was unable to see what happened to the craft after that and wasn't sure she wanted to. The mere thought of all those crushed, mangled bodies made her gorge rise all over again. She felt the impact, felt her eardrums rattle, and saw the plume of dust spike high into the sky. That poor little girl, crushed to a pulp, was the last thing she wanted to see. Homelander apparently didn't agree because he sped toward the scene of the crash and pulled her along with him. She could hear him curse and yell, but she couldn't bring herself to care at the time because those giants were getting smaller as they got closer, taking on the form of men, and she could see the plane, somehow undamaged despite landing, without its former mass. 2 titans, one a warrior and the other a beast. She heard voices and groans of pain inside, a sure sign of survivors, though none dared to show their faces yet. She didn't blame them because she knew they were too shell-shocked by their survival to even dare venture outside. Together, they had done what Homelanders couldn't or wouldn't do. They had saved the passengers, caught the plane, shielded its landing with their bodies, and brought it in safely. The body appeared to be quite intact, sans the wings. Maeve simply knew that there would be a reckoning for all those individuals, all those innocent souls abandoned to perish. She said, "Nice save, Sasuke," as she first noticed the blonde lying flat on his back close to the wrecked cockpit. Close call, almost didn't make it in time," she said. "We've been here less than a day and you pull this? Do you not know the meaning of a low profile?" a dark-haired man said, frowning at him with unsettling, mismatched eyes. Naruto. You're one to talk. It's all good that it ends well, the blonde exclaimed, pumping his fist. What matters is that we saved M. I guess, he said, craned his neck in their direction, frowning. Oh, look, nice of you to join us when the work's done, he said. Fortunately, his compatriot didn't seem to be interested in her at all, that one was already sitting up, squinting Homelander's way. His glare damned Maeve in an instant, condemned her and found her guilty in equal measure, as if he knew, as if he'd witnessed her cowardice firsthand, had he? She looked away, unable to bear the burning judgment in his gaze for even a moment longer. Yes, well, Homelander said, rallying and finding his voice, and his facade, before either of them. I guess we should extend our gratitude for your help. Thank you, he says. The brunette gasped. You've got some nerve saying that after what you did. They knew that Maeve's blood flowed cold. This couldn't be happening, and it wasn't happening. His smile faded. All right, I'll bite. Are you Asian pricks? Some sort of B-team, he asked. When Maeve finally got a good look at them, it almost seemed as though this improbable pair had just stepped out of feudal Japan. Their clothes were ragged, and their features were worn, but they nevertheless exuded a weird nobility and even dignity. Neither appeared happy to see them. After that terrible notion, questions came flooding in. She had seen them both jump out of the plane, but she couldn't remember their faces. Had she previously seen them? No, without a doubt not. She would have recalled distinguishing characteristics like that. So, some kind of disguise? However, if so, why? In the first place, why conceal their faces? Their argument suggested that they had been stowaways or, worse, that they had not wanted to be spotted. But what kind of stowaway possessed such abilities? The blonde one finally muttered, Our names ain't important, who the hell do you think you are? Pardon? Homelander, the kind Maeve never wanted to see, became horribly still. His strange-eyed friend snarled, You heard him, monster. Maeve managed to escape Homelander's hold. Care to say that again? The large jerk said, his eyes blazing crimson, so it was just as well. The blonde piped up, I'll say it as many times as you want, as he crossed both legs underneath himself. The action immediately drew the attention and ire of Homelanders. You're a monster and a coward, he said, raising his chin in churlish defiance, oblivious to the man who now towered over him. How could you leave those people to die? You're supposed to be a hero. He struggled for words, seeming to be angry and saying, that's not the point. There wasn't time. That plane was ours. Those grave blue eyes drilled into him like a bullet never could, we witnessed it all. Those were your words, the young man with the black hair screamed. I'll laser every one of you. Hissing a breath, Homelander said, You. Strangely, some of the voices in the plane sounded like the blonde, but it didn't make sense because he was sitting directly in front of them. He couldn't be in two places at once right now, could he? It just wasn't conceivable. When the young girl she had failed to save stuck her head out the damaged exit, Maeve's heart tightened. Because another blonde with the same face as the one glaring at Homelander was keeping guard over her. This time, what fever dream have I fallen into? The swordsman raised a dark eyebrow at her and said, We were led to believe there were already heroes in this world, and she knew he wasn't finished. That there wouldn't be a need for people like us, he said. I offered you every opportunity to do anything up there, and you did. You tried, but after what we just saw. I wanted to believe you were a good person, the blonde-turned soulful blue eyes said to her. Without considering Homelander's impending arrival, he put one hand on his knee and pulled himself up to his full height. You're no hero, you could have done anything, you didn't even try, he said, jerking his chin away. At least she feels bad about all this. Maeve's perspective broke. She noticed Homelander twitching dimly. Are you aware of who I am? Who are you having sex with? Despite the snarl that followed, the blonde stomped a foot against the dirt and sprang up to face him directly. That's what you are, she said, pressing a finger to his chest and digging a nail into the material of his costume. No, you're not even that, you're a bully, a big-brain bully in a cape, she said. Her face was redder than she had ever seen it before. You little prick. My name is Naruto, he said, his palm weeping and pushing him away with the ease of a squalling toddler. Now, if you don't mind, we have to send these people to safety since it's obvious that they're not secure with you. We'll deal with you later, come on, Sasuke. Do you think you can handle another Susanoo? He said, stalking past and heading for the plane's battered escape. We must return these people to civilization. Just give them a ride on Kurama or something, his colleague sneered. I ain't a taxi service, the blonde said, giving him a back pat. As their amicable argument continued, Maeve's heart began to churn with panic. Homelander had threatened and abandoned them, just as she had failed them. Word would spread within an hour, ruining him and possibly saving her, but even if it did, the guilt of what she had done today and what she had failed to do would follow her for the rest of her life. Perhaps they deserved that, and Vought might attempt to portray it in their favor, but with so many witnesses. The two young men had already turned their backs on them, ignoring them completely in favor of helping people out of the plane. She caught a glimpse of the little girl from earlier, tugging at the blonde's sleeve. He laughed and patted her head, then sputtered as she hugged his leg. Her mother was shaking Sasuke's hand, pumping his arm up and down in profuse thanks, much to the younger man's dismay. She could see the gears turning in Homelander's mind now, feel the threads snapping one by one even as she reached the same ugly conclusion. It dawned on me that these folks were truly heroes. She could already hear them muttering among themselves, see those poor people shrinking back in fear of Homelander, who had been eerily silent for far too long, and see others emerging now, staring, glaring at them. None of them had their phones out yet, but with so many prying eyes on them, it was only a matter of time. At that moment, Maeve had an even more repulsive thought: if everyone died here, would there not be any witnesses? It was one thing to leave people to die, but actually swinging her sword and killing them was quite another. If these two men and the passenger with them perished in the smoke, their careers would be safe, and no one would know the truth. She pushed it down almost instantly. No, she paused, and it cost her. Her words, well, this is unfortunate, had not yet been spoken. Don't. Naruto spun, his eyes wild. It's too late. The blonde jumped in, pushed his partner aside, and took the hit for him. He doubled over with a gasp as the lasers seared deep into his chest. Maeve looked away, unwilling to watch. Death was instantaneous. He didn't have time to dodge a shot like that, much less blunt the blow. Sasuke grabbed at Homelander's arm and shrugged her off. Heat shot out from his eyes, lancing out at the plane's fuel tank. The sigh caught her off guard. The young man didn't die, so he simply closed his eyes, took a long breath through his nose, and then opened them again. It's strange, weren't they blue just a moment ago? Why had they become red? Ignore that. How could he have survived? And glowing once more. He had strange black marks all over his body that she had never seen before, and his entire body glowed a golden gold. He turned on one heel to crack his knuckles and said, "That settles it, right? I'm going to feed you your own teeth," he said. "That was an awful line, you Braak," guffawed the Homelander. He gurgled wetly, hands leaping to his face, eyes bulging, and those words turned into a gurgle as clenched fists crashed up into his chin. Blood flowed from his lips as he bit his tongue, and he was still gurgling when a second punch sent him hurtling into the clouds, and Naruto roared up after him. "Nothing personal," said a sword resting against Maeve's throat. The side of her skull was whacked by the flat of his blade. Sleep arrived swiftly. 000. Pain. He was in pain. Why was he in pain? He was the Homelander, for heaven's sake. God Almighty. Unbeatable. Superhuman. He was impervious to everything. No one could stop him from doing whatever the devil he wanted, and he had killed anybody who tried. He was untouchable, and everyone fucking scared and adored him because they damn well should. Why was this blonde bastard defeating him? He was being tossed around like a dog's chew toy after that final blow alone had sent him hurtling into the mountains of God knew where. Eyes on the ball, big guy. For what must have been the umpteenth time, a hand closed around his face and slammed him down, making his face intimate with the ground in a way that no man wanted. Reality jerked back, anger flared, and he kicked out with both feet, booting his attacker into a mountain. His respite was short, golden lightning danced in his periphery, clenched fingers closed around his cape, and he was yanked off his feet. Should have realized that the cape was a terrible idea. When his attacker whirled with a roar and threw him back into the skies, he was barely digesting that. Momentum was cruel. Something struck his back and sent him 3 times as quickly into the ground, pushing him below the surface like a splinter through God's skin. The entire world turned white. His mind finally caught up to Homelander, who lay shocked for what seemed like an eternity, buried in the soil, entombed in the earth. Everything hurt. He hadn't felt this way in, well, forever. This was a joke, right? He would wake up any moment now and everything would be okay, wouldn't it? It was only a crazy fever dream. He was the Homelander, so it had to be. Wasn't he? He could hear a muffled voice shouting from the surface, "I ain't done with ya. Stop pouting and come up here." In the darkness, his eyes glowed hotly. Bastard! His muscles flexed, releasing him from his earthen stone coffin. A single kick pumped his legs and sent him skyward, where he loomed over his quarry, bloodied but unbowed. The little shit glared back at him, his red eyes unrepentant. If he thought that a few tricks of the trade in glowing skin would save him, he had another thing coming. He would beat this bastard black and blue. "Because your day is going to get a lot worse," he said, running a hand over his unclean hair and making it perfect once more. He was waffled by a golden hand saying, "I'm shaking in my sandals." The final straw was when Homelander blasted him. "This is my country. Not yours." Clenched knuckles smashed down on the back of his neck, beating him into the ground, and he folded with a wheeze as the world spun to the right again. The blonde swayed aside, grabbed him by the wrist, and pulled him in like a fisherman would a fat fish. Country. Baleful red eyes met his as the bewildering blonde seized him by the hair and pulled him up, tearing at the roots. "We're not here for your country," he said. His face was swept by the same golden palm. Homelander saw what he was doing and made a blind grab to stop what he believed to be an attempt to tear out his eye. His hands flew out, grabbing at the boy's wrist, but the blonde met him in kind. Their palms locked, their feet braced against the ground, and the ground itself shattered beneath them as they struggled for supremacy. This was all right, even if the child was faster than him, he knew he was stronger, so why was he being moved? You can't win. Homelander gritted his teeth and struggled again, only to be shoved back. Sweat beaded his brow. I already have, he said with a nearly painful smile. A nanosecond after Naruto's head reared back and nailed him, stars burst before Homelander's eyes as the headbutt came true. His back kissed a tree, and then another tree, and yet another, and still another, and another. His brief flight uprooted half a forest, and anyone else would have been crushed by so many fallen oaks, which only made him more irate. Why, you little Asian prick? When he sprang to his feet, the blonde was gone. Care to repeat that, was said as a finger tapped his shoulder. Homelander swirled into clamped knuckles while howling. With a terrible snap, his nose bent, and as he gripped his face, blood sluiced to the ground. As Homelander scowled at his bloody palms, the blonde bounded away, smiling. Never been hit by someone your own size before? You have to turn your body with the punch, you know, helps reduce the impact, he said, bouncing back from a retaliatory swipe, dodging a broad kick, and hammering a right hook against the back of his head, slamming him into the dirt once more. That's the most basic of basics, he said. A growling sphere crashed into his chest, slamming him down as he barely to a knee before the child was on him again. As his voice mocked him and reverberated against his torn spleen, a 1-2-3 folded his ribs and said, "But you wouldn't know that, would you? You're just a bully, do you even train?" All he could do was defend, let alone fight back, but he was now relentless, hammering him with an impossible pattern of attacks. Even then, he found himself tossed back and forth, like a doll in the wind, with his face twisting, bones breaking, and his body bleeding. A knee nailed him in the groin, and he folded with a whimper. If this continued, Homelander experienced fear for the first time in decades. He let out a yell. "Stop it!" His cry had the power to shatter eardrums, but the blonde just flinched, the slightest interruption to the attack, which allowed him time to get away and fly to a safer place in the sky. "Should I act more like you, then? Would that make you feel better?" Naruto pressed a finger to his ear and picked at it, saying, "I'm sorry, did I hurt your feelings?" Shut up, just shut up." Heat pierced his eyes, driven by unadulterated hatred, turning the grove beneath it into a raging conflagration. "Why don't you die?" A shadow moved through the flames and the fire and asked, "What's the matter? Are you going to cry?" I said. The blonde appeared in front of him in a flash of movement, saying, "You can fly." "Nope," said a tiny smile with furrowed brows, "jump good." A fist swung down at Homelander's head, and he grabbed it with one hand and braced his wrist with the other in a last-ditch effort to prevent his doom. His arms trembled, his muscles quivered, and he glared up at him as twin palms clapped down on either side of his head with the force of a falling star, momentarily deafening him. Additionally, his eyes ignited. At close range, heat roared out of his eyes and struck the blonde's skull. Petty pride burned through him as he finally heard a cry of pain. "After I'm done with you," he growled, his teeth bared, "I'm going to flash fry your friend, those dumb passengers, and you ever." Homelander's words died in a muffled gurgle as a golden first pierced through his beam, obliterating his pearly whites and a good portion of his jaw. The same hand then closed around his face, and his heat vision fizzled out harmlessly against it as he caught a glimpse of an irritated face through clenched fingers, completely unharmed despite his best efforts. "Remember what I promised you." The beast's eyes, slitted orbs, glared down at him. As dread set in, Homelander's eyes widened and his jaw was forced shut by his clasped fingers. "Now swallow." When Maeve saw him, she knew it was done. When Naruto pulled Homelander back to the plane by his cape, she really tried not to object, but she obviously failed. He was bloodied and battered, his jaw was broken, and his eyes were bound by a thick strip of cloth. He didn't even have the strength to fight back, and it wouldn't have helped him much. His captor had him wrapped in golden chains from his shoulders to his ankles. Perhaps it was a blessing that they had knocked him out. Phones clicked, cameras flashed, and she knew he would be furious if he woke up. The swordsman over there appeared quite eager to complete the task his companion had begun. From where she lay sprawled out on the ground, she had a clear view of everything. The wire he had used to bind her limbs was strong, and any attempt to resist it only made them tighten. She could feel it biting through her armor to prick the skin underneath, and she just knew, that any further resistance on her part would leave her a bloody mess. Naturally, the populace didn't care about her situation. They swarmed around the golden guy like sheep to a shepherd, practically swarming him in an attempt to attack him. The fiery blonde interrupted their conversation by holding up a hand and saying, "It's okay now. I promise he can't harm you anymore." "Is he alive?" The young girl she had failed to save crouched between Sasuke's legs. "That may change," the dark-haired man growled. "For now." As her mother approached, she said, "I wanted to thank you." He turned to face her and said, "Miss, I didn't understand your name." As Maeve watched, the woman shook his hand firmly and said, "Susan, this is my daughter Maya," bending over and putting an arm around the nervous girl. "Thank you ever so much for saving us," she said. Maya clung to his leg and muttered her own agreement. Maeve could see that the swordsman wasn't used to this kind of attention. His confidence faltered and was replaced by anxiety. Despite his strength, he almost seemed to recoil when he saw the mother and child. He was like a noble and fierce beast, unsure of what to do when given a small act of kindness. If it weren't for her own heartbreaking failure, she would have thought it was funny. Naruto glanced over and grinned with satisfaction. Sasuke mouthed his way for assistance. "Enjoy yourselves," Blonde mouthed back. Even when Sasuke bridled, he just got a headshake. When Maeve wasn't looking, someone, she never saw who it was, threw a violent punch to the chained Homelander's face. She heard it more than she saw it, and a cry went up. John's head snapped to the side without making any noise, but he didn't move at all. "Hey! Who did that?" said Naruto. He appeared to want to protest against such senseless violence until he saw their faces. He let out a long, agonizing sigh, took 2 steps back, putting distance between them but still being close enough to intervene, and nodded. That set the passengers off. The able-bodied survivors swarmed upon Homelander in large numbers, spitting, snarling, and swearing. They couldn't hurt him, of course, but they could tear his uniform, rend his cape, rip off his boots, dirty his face, ruin his hair, and leave his dignity in ruins. When Naruto turned to face her, they were still wailing on him. The cross-shaped pupils of those dazzling red eyes pierced her whole soul. He whispered, "All right, what do we do with you?" If it weren't for these two, all of these people would have died, but they hadn't given up, they'd accomplished the impossible. Flight 37 was supposed to be Vaught's greatest accomplishment, the shining jewel in their crown. It would have put them on the map, got them into national defense, and made them gods in the eyes of the public. Maeve hung her head, unable to meet his gaze, and it embarrassed her more than she wanted to admit. Right now, their biggest failure was unavoidable. No disaster of this size could be concealed. Therefore, this was the place where they would perish. Perhaps they deserved it. Oi, Sasuke, let her up. When the wire bit severely into Maeve's thighs, she had to relax her muscles and drop back to the mud. Her head sprang up, and she immediately regretted it. His partner seemed equally perplexed, saying, "You must be kidding. She tried to save these people, so that makes her a sore sight better than this bastard. Let her up," she said, hearing the blonde click his tongue out of sight. "This is your funeral." The ninja wire that was securing her was released with a simple flip of the wrist. Her spirit was stung by those bright, mismatched eyes. In contrast to his buddy, his stare threatened violence if she attempted to get away. "Don't make me regret this," he said. Even so, where would she go? They had landed on a deserted island in the middle of nowhere, with miles of water. She was unable to fly, but Naruto and Sasuke could, and she had seen them. She didn't think she had much chance of trying to swim away, either, especially with everyone staring at her. If it came to a fight, Homelander began to stir behind her. Naruto entered the fray and kicked the man in the head, causing him to fall with a gurgle. In a single, unthinking fear, her brain bleated, "Nope, don't mess with that." Maeve was able to nod submissively. The strongest of them, Homelander, had already fallen, marking the end of an age. All she could do was hope she wouldn't be the next. 000. Like wildfire, word of Homelander's sinister act spread. It was possible for Vought to silence one witness, perhaps even a dozen at a time, but more than 100? Several people on that plane had their phones close at hand, each of them recording incriminating video of what transpired. Perhaps if the plane had crashed as planned, things would have turned out differently. Whose greatest desire was to see Homelander's head on a pike? For such a horrible crime, there could only be one result. Vought shocked everyone in the aftermath, but no one was more shocked than one Billy Butcher. 000. Saker Blue. Butcher. Look at this. What the fuck is going on? I'm sleeping for Chris sakes. What had his knickers in a twist this time? Didn't a man have a right to a little rest? Billy creaked one eye open where he lay, bottle in hand. His accent could only be Frenchy. The TV. Come on. Hurry. Keep your pants on. Okay, fine, he said, realizing that he would not sleep. He rose up and followed the furious Frenchman, who was actually jabbing a finger at the television. "What are ye yammering on about?" He fell silent as he saw the television, instead, the pictures on the screen, and it was quite a sight. It was easy to see why, but as Butcher watched a series of damning footage flash by in the background, showing what he'd done, his heart soared with every second of the tape. Fucking Homelander, gagged and bound, live on national television, looked livid. Two men stood guard over him, looking rather harassed themselves as they simultaneously fielded questions from reporters and kept an eye on the blonde braggart. Stan Edgar stood not a pace away from it all, his face carved out of marble. "I'm going to laser all of you." Well, he said, leaning forward, "isn't this a legitimate celebration? What's the term you Americans use?" Frenchie whistled. "He's fucked," said Eminem, laughing into his fist. The Huey simply gazed. Butcher completely agreed with the child, who appeared to be shell-shocked. He would have said the same thing if he could have spoken, but it failed him now, leaden and dead in his mouth. For him, it was more of a bloody catharsis than a shock because he had lived for this day, to see the power of Homelander brought low and all of his sinister actions exposed. Strangely, Huey was the first to speak up. Is that New York? Looks like Vought Tower to me, Frenchie said, squinting. Edmund kept laughing. We are better than this, and I would like to personally thank these fine young gentlemen and Queen Maeve for bringing this matter to my attention. Homelander's actions do not constitute Vought, said Stan Edgar, who appeared grimly pleased as the reporters started to bug him. It seemed as though he had wanted this. A question was posed. Butcher grasped its tail. Accountability for his actions. He will, of course, lose his position among the seven and be placed under arrest. Rest assured, we intend to see him brought to justice for his crimes today and charged to the fullest extent of the law, Edgar said, with a faint smirk on his lips. No. You can't do this to me. Homelander rushed forward, slurring his words due to a broken jaw. My name is Homelargh. Vivid blue sparks erupted forth, sending Homelander jerking and spasming beneath an azure current. He sank with a groan, steam rising from his shoulders, a torrent of incoherent babble, and his defiance turned into a strangling scream as the dark-haired man turned and slapped a hand into his chest. As you can see, grinned Stan, we have the situation under control. Who will lead the seven with him gone? Stan jumped right in and said, I'm so very glad you asked, adding, I am proud to grant the role of captain to none other than Queen Maeve for her unwavering bravery and heroism in the face of such a crisis, for doing everything she could, with death staring her in the face. And we would be honored to induct these young heroes into the ranks of the seven. After then, Butcher stopped listening to their response since he didn't want that jerk to ruin his happiness. He engraved the image of Homelander's defenseless body in his memory so that, at the very least, he would never forget this day. A god was humbled that day, too damned right. He started with a smirk, then a snicker, which led to an outright laugh. Before long, he was practically crouching, clutching his stomach, and laughing uncontrollably. He continued to laugh while crying, even as Huey fell out of his chair. Even the girl was objecting to him, but he was unable to stop himself. Becca would have loved this. In fact, his missus would have laughed herself silly. If she had been present, he was certain that she would have been beaming from ear to ear. It warmed his blood more than he wanted to admit, so he continued laughing. Think we broke him, said as she leaned back. Perhaps he was broken. He would have preferred to be the one to give that arrogant jerk a hard time, but instead he would accept this. He was forced to stand up straight once another, more repulsive revelation hit him in the head. Queen Maeve might be with him, and that big bastard might be bugged, but there were two new soups standing there that he knew absolutely nothing about. However, they lacked appropriate capes, costumes, and masks, giving the impression that they had just emerged from a combat zone. Which raised the query, who the hell, he said, pointing to the two men on TV, are these two guys? Frenchie shrugged his shoulders and said, no idea, I don't recognize them. Ain't seen these two motherfuckers before, and I've seen a few, said, folding his arms in front of his large chest. They just came out of nowhere, like gods or something. Gods? Huey said, if there was a god, he was giggling at all of them. Bloody hell, he said, still grinning. Let's find out who our new friends are right now, he said. Frenchie raised an eyebrow at him, saying, companions. Slip of the tongue, mate. He detested soups and detested them all, but he believed that he could put up with these two if they weren't worse than Homelander, if they had a soul, and if fucking Stan Edgar and Vought didn't destroy them or worse, recruit them. There are a lot of ifs, that, nevertheless, he might find some somber satisfaction in witnessing the man who sexually assaulted his wife go unpunished. Pa! Serves that twat right, he said, turning his head away and spatting. His laughing filled the room. Naruto let out a sigh of satisfaction and threw himself into the couch. All things considered, the sofa was very nice. It was not too soft, but it was also not too hard. It was, as they say, just right. He closed his eyes and sank into the cushions, reveling in his victory. After the crazy week he had had, it would be so easy to fall asleep, let the fatigue take over, and simply forget about everything. We're not done here, you know that, yet it's enticing but not practical. He suppressed a yawn in response to Kurama's remark, saying, I know, suppose it's too much to ask for. Vought may appear dubious, and they were, he could spend the rest of his life trapped in a waking nightmare for all he cared. There was no redemption for someone like that, it was simply not possible. However, at least they were aware of the hierarchy. Perhaps they were also afraid of what he and Sasuke had done to Homelander. Which led them to where they are now. As his voice reverberated into the empty room, pretty nice digs, huh? As Sasuke returned inside, he heard a door slam behind him. Had he gone fishing by the lake once more? He waved a hand in the air, trying to think of the correct term. I mean, it's awful nice of them to put us up in this, what did they call it? Penthouse. Was that the word? He said. His comrade said as a chair was pulled out and a dull thump followed. They made us a pretty good offer, though, think we should take it? He said as he heard a fabric brush against his blade. Naruto felt a muscle in his jaw flex. He turned over, opened his eyes, and glared at his pal, asking, okay, what gives? You haven't said a word all day and is that blood on your sword? Still polishing his sword, Sasuke looked up. So it is, he said with a bitter smile on his pale face. A complete bodily spasm followed that twitch. Tell me you stabbed a fish. From a particular perspective, a pillow erupted in a shower of feathers after slamming into his face. As he cleaned his blade, the final Uchiha continued without hesitation, I stabbed an annoying fish man, adding, called himself the Deep. He was lurking in the lake, when I tried to interrogate him as to why, he fled. I took exception to that, he said. Sent to spy on us, you think, he said, his fury waning. Probably. Did you kill him? The quiet was telling. Did you at least bury the body? Burned it to ashes with Amaterasu, no evidence. He looked out the window, but it was empty. What little he could see of the lake was still and dormant. Was there some charring near the shore? From this vantage point, he couldn't be certain. If there had been a fight, he would have missed it, which was unfortunate as well because he had been so bored lately that he would have seized the opportunity for some excitement. Rather, he had been turned away. He let out a long, agonized sigh and raised his arms. His frown intensified when his partner didn't answer. This is why I can't take you anywhere nice, he added. Look, you've barely said a word since we got here, come on, talk to me, he pleaded. Since they were stuck in this universe, they had become more forthcoming with one another. What other option did they have? Even if it was their own fault, their battle, killing one another didn't solve anything. Their house was peaceful, since it had brought them to this point, there was no genuine reason for them to kill each other. Sasuke exhaled, this isn't our world, yet there you go again, acting like it is. You're saying we should let those people on the plane die? Because if you are, he said, his brow furrowed. But these so-called heroes. I dislike them, better to kill them all outright, Sasuke said with a flick of his fingers. To be honest, the idea of starting again and cleaning the slate was alluring. However, his conscience objected a second later, saying, "Oi, that's not what we do. If it weren't for you and me, this Homelander would still be doing whatever he wanted, and only he knows where that would go." Then maybe we should, his old friend said, looking up at the last with burning eyes. Fair point. Maybe so, Naruto said, leaning himself up after realizing he wouldn't be winning this argument anytime soon. But only the corrupt ones should be punished. I ain't about to sanction wholesale slaughter, he said. And if they're all corrupt? They're not, Sasuke, he frowned. Unyielding, the Uchiha asked, but if they are? Then we kick their asses, bring them to justice, and lock them away. That's naive, Naruto, even for you. Sometimes the best end is by the blade. Before he controlled his rage, his blue eyes briefly turned red. Sasuke, for his part, kept staring at him. You really can be a cold prick sometimes, you know, said a blonde eyebrow. Not by choice. If you're the light, then I'm the shadow, can't have one without the other. In that regard, I don't mind staining my hands, you're welcome to keep yours clean, if you want, might even be easier for me, that way, said Sasuke, who was rarely the type to laugh these days, but he did give him a grim smile. When did you get so philosophical? His eyes were mismatched, and he said, I, for one, refuse to die here, for we have a planet to return to, a battle to complete. Oi, oi, another one? He leaned forward, a frown pulling at his whiskered cheeks. Are you still talking about that? The result was a tie. I am not satisfied with a draw, Sasuke said, raising his chin in a mulish manner. Well, you'll have to be, I ain't fighting you here. As you desire. Sasuke scowled and backed off, knowing that the issue was not resolved, but simply tabled for the time being. They would return to this later. Killing for self-defense was fine, but there had to be a limit. You couldn't just go around killing people because it was easier or in case they weren't the monsters here, unlike Homelander. Naruto sat up when someone knocked on their door, diverting his attention. You get it, Sasuke said, shifting his hold on his blade. Do I have to? He whimpered as he slid over. Would you rather I kill them? There was another knock. For heaven's sake, his instincts told him who it was, but he was still glad to see them nevertheless. He took 3 short steps to the doorway, and another carried him the whole distance. He then twisted the deadbolt, disabled the traps, drew back the lock, and swung it wide. Maeve. How are you? All right, she said with a feeble smile, may I enter? He was overjoyed to receive her, saying, sure, sure. Right this way, I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Sasuke grunted and said, you were. We were getting bored, Naruto said over him. Not at all. He noticed that she had returned in her armor, but it seemed different in some way. She was brighter and more polished, reflecting her current position in the 7. She burned in his 6th sense like a burning brand, not quite content but happier, a sore sight better than the mess she had been since he last saw her. He wasn't sure what would make her feel that way, it worried him more than he wanted to admit, and it was obviously annoying his brother-in-arms. With a flip of his kunai, Sasuke asked, why are you here? They thought a friendly face might be best, she said, closing her face. They? That would be my doing, an elderly guy said as he emerged behind her, a tiny smile wrinkling in his sad, dark face. "May I?" he said. Naruto acknowledged this one and waved him in. "We met briefly at the press conference," the man replied, offering him a hand in return. "Stan Edgar, CEO of Vought," he said, grinning as they shook. "I'm sorry we haven't had time to speak further," he said. Maeve shrugged helplessly as Naruto shot her a weather-related glance, but that wasn't what troubled him. He read about this Edgar guy. "Be cautious. The world will never forget that, for which we have you to thank." "How is he, by the way?" "In fact, you did, we created him," Stan said in response to something Sasuke said while he was preoccupied. "But we had precious little control over him, until now," he said, his once friendly smile turning to ice. "He left those people to die, and coerced Maeve into following him, or he'd kill her, too." A weaker man would have fled at the sight of Sasuke's smile, trapped in his own mind. "He'll never wake up, and even if he does, I took precautions," he said. Stan pricked his fingers and said, "May I inquire what kind of precautions?" Sasuke merely grinned before turning his head away. "Are you going to murder him? You had one of your men spying on us, if it comes to that. You killed the Deep, didn't you? In any case, we had intended to replace him eventually because he had recently gotten contentious. This only makes it sooner rather than later, and I'm sure Maeve would be more than delighted to find someone better fit for the post." "Ah," Stan said, taking the warning in stride. She didn't object, but she did make a frustrated noise. It was true that she was now the head of the Seven, but it wasn't actually the Seven at the time, was it? There were rumors that they had been losing members, that Homelander was absent, that a man dubbed Translucent had been killed, and that Sasuke had offed someone termed the Deep. Sasuke murmured, "You're acting like we work for you, but we don't." "You say you want to make heroes better," Edgar replied, "I'm giving you that chance." For a minute, the idea caused Naruto's thoughts to spin, thinking, it was a tempting offer, really, or, perhaps they could reform Vought, or we could always kill him. "No, Sasuke. Oh no, Sasuke. The solution isn't always violence." "You're right," he said with a nod, and his brief comfort was short-lived. "Violence is the question, the answer is yes," he said. Angry at him, Naruto leaned back and said, "Did you just make a joke?" His reward was a slight shrug. "You're rubbing off on me," he said. The hush continued to linger. "I'll be honest," Maeve finally said into it. She said, gesturing to herself first, then Edgar. "Don't want to be your enemy," she said. "Good decision, our adversaries don't last long. Ignore him, he's got a terminal case of stick up his ass, I'm afraid there's no cure," Naruto said, winking a pillow off his head. The final Uchiha only sneered. "That woman and her daughter have been asking after you, by the way," Maeve said, seizing her opportunity. "Are they now? How are they? Are you treating them well?" Sasuke said, flushed as all of his calm evaporated. "Looking to restore your clan?" Naruto asked, a slow smile spreading across his face. The apple would have taken his head, but he dodged it. He sensed that Sasuke wasn't the romantic kind, at least not on the surface, and that he wasn't the kind to pursue power these days. It didn't surprise him that he had developed feelings for a regular woman and her child, and he deserved a little happiness after everything he had been through. Once again grabbing their attention, Edgar said, "In any case, I'd like to formally offer you both a place in the Seven." Sasuke and Naruto looked at each other wryly. "You must be joking."